It was as if I was playing a game of cat and mouse. If I went to one end of the barracks in chase of the footstep sounds, it would stop, and it would start happening on the other side of the courtyard. How's it going, YouTube, friends, and family? In this video, we're going to be exploring the haunting of the Virginia Military Institute. Now, I graduated from VMI, and afterwards I served as an infantry officer in the United States Army. And I love VMI, but the place is haunted. I will be referring to my own personal experiences, but also based on my own research. And before we go any further, let's look at the origin story of VMI. Warning, do not watch this video if you are by yourself. Do not watch this video at night. Alright, so let's talk about the history of VMI. The Virginia Military Institute was founded in 1839 in Lexington, Virginia, and it started out as an arsenal that kept the weapons and supplies of the Virginia militia. And it was guarded by student sentinels 24/7, ensuring that the property of Virginia was kept safe, but also in instilling the officership and military training to the students to become future leaders. From the very beginning, the vision was clear: to have an austere, Spartan lifestyle with no comfort, to have bare bones so that it could be character building. It is also the oldest state-supported military university in the United States. It's cultivated with tradition and the honor system. It is the only single-sanctioned honor code system in the United States. There are no warnings, there are no do-overs, there are no 3 strikes. You lie, cheat, or steal, and you are drummed out and excommunicated from the community. And because of this, through the years and the decades, this has led to many cadets committing suicide in the face of dishonor. It reminds me of the way of samurais in Bushido. And because of its very nature of being a military school that produces warriors that go off to wars and battles, naturally, some of these spirits come back to still stay within the Corps of Cadets for a time that was more safe than the war zone that they were put into. And there have been countless number of reports from sentinels that were pulling their guard duty that have seen ghost sightings since the Civil War. The first haunting, Virginia mourning her dead. It's a statue that was sculpted and crafted by Moses Ezekiel. And when you look at her face closely in the wake of the night, you'll notice that her face comes to life, as there are tears dripping down her cheeks, and you can hear faint cries as she mourns over the death of VMI alumni who lost their lives in the battlefield. Haunting number 2. There have been hundreds of reports of a friendly ghost that lives within the barrack walls. At VMI, there is something called the Blue Book that is full of rules that cadets must comply by, and if you break any of them, you get demerits. One of these is being late to your guard duty shift. Now, this friendly ghost goes around and wakes up VMI cadets just in time for guard duty so that they won't be late. Haunting number 3, the Yellow Peril. Now, this ghost is not a friendly one and has been reportedly seen only in old barracks on the 3rd stoop. And they describe the Yellow Peril as an individual that walks around wearing a cadet uniform with a yellow face that is all bloodied up. And sometimes, as friendly cadets, in walking by, we might say hey to one another. And at 4 a.m. in the morning, with eye boogers clouding your vision when you're on your way to the bathroom, you might have to do a double take and realize that this is not a human that you just greeted. Haunting number 4, the Chapel Mural, a depiction of the cadets at the Battle of Newmarket. They say that after midnight, especially around the hours of 2 to 4 a.m., if you get a good look at the painting, it bleeds as it depicts the cadets who died on the battlefield. Haunting number 5, death before dishonor. Now this is a very popular military saying that we must always walk with a moral compass and personal values to the highest of standards. And at VMI, having an honor code system that is so unforgiving. In the past, there used to be a tree on the parade deck where cadets that were found guilty on an account of lying, cheating, or stealing would eventually hang themselves on. And through the years, the officials of the school decided to cut down the tree to discourage the behavior of excommunicated cadets from hanging themselves any longer. But the damage is already done, as there have been reports that some cadets have seen their former classmates walking around the hallways and in the stoops of barracks. Now on to my own personal story of my encounter with a ghost at VMI. Now you can talk to any VMI alumni and they'll have a ghost story to share with you as well. Now I actually had the privilege of living in all 3 different barracks at VMI. My rad year, aka freshman experience, I was at the 4th stoop in 3rd barracks. And for my 3rd class year, I was in new barracks. And in my 1st and 2nd class year, I was in old barracks. And remember when we talked about the origin and backstory of VMI and how important the sentinels were for protecting and guarding the assets of Virginia and her arsenal of weapons and supplies? Well, that tradition still continues to this day. And guard duty at the Virginia Military Institute is conducted by all the individual companies within the Corps of Cadets and were changed on a day-to-day basis. And it's a 24-hour shift, and there is always a company of cadets on guard duty 24/7. And this happened in November in the Shenandoah Mountains of Virginia, where the temperatures are very cold in the morning, but even more cold during the night. And for my particular guard duty shift, I was assigned the graveyard one, 1:30 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. It was my task and duty to observe, to protect VMI as my fellow cadets were sleeping within the barrack walls. And the uniform might look really sharp in pictures and videos, but it's very uncomfortable to be wearing a thick layer of wool all over your body. And surprisingly, the wool actually does a half-decent job of keeping you warm. However, this was a very particularly cold evening, where before I went to bed, 10 minutes before taps, I kept thinking to myself that this was going to be a very cold shift of pulling guard duty. And I was no stranger to guard duty, having previously done maybe 9 rotations up until this point. But like a diligent cadet, I went to bed at 11:29 p.m. right before taps hit. And I went to bed knowing that I would have to wake up in an hour and a half. So I put my head down on my hay, I closed my eyes, and I went to sleep. I woke up to the sound of my alarm on my wrist, my Casio G-Shock. I woke up at 1 a.m. knowing that I would have to report to my shift in 15 minutes. I got out of my rack, I put on my clothes, my uniform of the day, or in this case, the night, and I went down to the guard room to do my shift. And as I was approaching the staircase to go down to 3rd stoop and eventually the 2nd stoop, it felt off this night. I showed up to the guard room 17 minutes early. I was there to relieve my brother Rat, who was on duty from 11:30 to 1:30. Eventually, the sergeant of the guard put me at my post and replaced us at approximately 1:25 a.m. I showed up early and I let my brother Rat go to sleep 5 minutes earlier. Now, in the spirit of full transparency, I've never been a fan of the dark. Even before joining the military, growing up as a child, and as a teenager, I've never been friends with the dark. It's just something about the unknown and what lurks in those shadows. I don't like it. And I remember, even in the army, doing land navigation was not a problem for me. However, night land nav, I always felt a little off about finding those digit grid points in the middle of the woods at night. But deep down, I knew that at VMI I had to learn to face my fears and do it anyways. So my shift started off okay. The barracks at 1:40 a.m. was pretty silent. You could hear some shuffling of the feet of some upper class cadets that were returning back to barracks from studying all night long at the Nichols Engineering Building or Scott Ship Hall. Nothing too unusual. And as the clock approached 2 a.m., I looked down at my watch and I realized that I still had an hour and a half left of my guard duty. And this is where I start to get a little sleepy. And as you get sleepy, as a sentinel on guard on the floor of the barracks, you pace back and forth to keep yourself up. And as I did that, it was a silent night, which is unusual because on my way down to the guard room to start my shift, there were lots of various vague noises from all corners of the barracks. But at 2 a.m. in the morning, it was dead silent. And this is where I was combating drowsiness. If you fall asleep on duty, there's dire consequences, especially in the military. So I knew that right now I had to do whatever it took within me to stay awake. And boy, was my wish granted, because at about 2:15 a.m., I started to hear loud footsteps all around the courtyard of the barracks. They were no more than 50 meters away from me. And in a dark setting, I could look out and make out that there was nothing there. So I was starting to get a little scared. Was it my mind that was playing tricks on me because I'm sleepy? Or is there something ominous occurring? So every time I heard the shuffling of feet and footsteps from the distance, I would do my duty as a guard and sentinel of the night and go towards it to make sure that it's no one causing trouble to the barracks or to my fellow cadets. And every time I approached where the sound was coming, it would dissipate and be gone. It was as if I was playing a game of cat and mouse. If I went to one end of the barracks in chase of the footstep sounds, it would stop, and it would start happening on the other side of the courtyard. Now mind you, the temperature outside was probably around 12 degrees Fahrenheit. It was cold, and I was sweating up a storm, because deep down, I knew that this was not a natural occurrence, that something was happening, and I couldn't wait for my shift to be over. I looked down at my clock after getting tired of playing cat and mouse with the mysterious footstep sounds. It was approximately 3 a.m. I told myself, okay, Amos, 30 more minutes to go. You can go back up to your room in the barracks and go to bed and wake up to do it all over again in the morning. A piece of advice that I gained from the military is that when you're doing something that is not enjoyable, you have to learn how to embrace the suck. And another piece of advice is that when you want something to be over soon, and it's a suffering event or a discipline event, stop looking at the clock. But I couldn't help it. I was a young 18-year-old, and I kept looking at my clock every minute. 3:01, 3:02, 3:03. I kept hearing the footsteps in the distance, and every time I would go up and investigate, no one would be there. I was terrified, I was scared, and so I toughed it out, and I kept looking at my clock every minute. And as the clock approached 3:25, I was hoping that my brother Rad, that was to replace me and relieve me of my duty to take my place, would come a little bit earlier. But that wish, that dream, it didn't happen. And so as the clock hit 3:29, this is when I knew that trouble was about to happen. And this is where it got a little strange. Yes, the footsteps kept occurring in the distance, but when you look at the barracks, and I was stationed at Old Barracks, it was my duty to take care of the main infrastructure of VMI, the oldest standing barracks. And there's a gate in the courtyard where every cadet goes in and out in the rat line. That's the main entry point. And at about 3:30, this is when a blue-gray mist started to occur. And in the Shenandoah Mountains, this is not unusual. There's a lot of fog from the mountains that settles down into our parade deck and around our barracks. But in this night, this mist was not natural. It was blue, gray, and it looked more like a tornado without a sound, and winds that were silent. And the best way that I can describe it is this blue and gray mist. I could see it in the distance, roughly 120 meters out from the entry point in Old Barracks in the parade deck, and it was fastly approaching the entrance of Old Barracks. And it started to formulate into a thick fog. As it crashed in, it kind of looked like a beach wave crashing in. And as it got closer to the entrance of Old Barracks, and no more than 20 meters away from where I was standing, it started to take shape. Now you have to understand that at this point in the story, it's probably 3:33 a.m. in the morning. No, I wasn't relieved yet. Yes, I'm 3 minutes doing overtime. But what's important to note is that 3:33 is considered the devil's hour, where spirits that approach you in this time frame, they're not friendly. They call it the devil's hour because 3:33 is halfway to, And as this fog came crashing in through the gates of the Old Barracks, I slowly backpedaled until my back hit a fence, and I closed my eyes and I swallowed my tongue. And at this point, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I kept thinking, what would I do if this ghost approaches me and tries to hurt me? There's not much that I can do. I would lose that fight. And I opened one eye and I looked out and I saw that this fog-like sensation, it suddenly took shape in the form of a human. A tall 6'9", 7 foot masculine figure. And it was walking around, not making any noise. It didn't have any detailed figures to it. It was ambiguous looking, and what it looked like was like a soldier returning home from battle and taking off his gear and looking for his place to rest for the night. I tried my best to keep my distance from myself and whatever this aberration ghost figure was, and I stayed in the corner of Old Barracks courtyard and in the corner of my eye, and I heard a faint sound, footsteps that were coming my way. I looked down at my watch, 3:40 a.m. And as that sound got closer and closer, I was relieved to know that it was the night sergeant of the guard and my brother Rat, the next sentinel, to take over my duty shift. And as he replaced me, I looked back and I noticed that the fog-light figure was gone. Looking back, I have a lot of fond memories of VMI, but there were a lot of creepy and scary instances that happened that makes me so confident to know that VMI is very haunted. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will talk to you next time. It almost makes you wonder if the footsteps that I was hearing that night were from that fog ghost that I saw.